This is LBC with Nick Abbott.
Off to America to talk to our US correspondent Simon Marks, who joins us on the line from Washington, D.C. Hello, Simon.
Good evening, Nick.
Almost 100 days of stability, progress and joy.
Can you believe it? Have you put the bunting out? Because
Not
Donald
yet.
Trump certainly is planning to do that. He's got a big week coming up in which the White House will, I think, go ahead and celebrate, despite the fact that opinion polls show his numbers are dipping pretty substantially. In one poll that came out today, his approval rating down to 41%. Other polling earlier in the week suggested that he'd lost a few points less over the last week, and his approval rating was standing at 43 or 44%. But either way, he's at the lowest approval rating at the 100-day mark of any of his most recent predecessors. There are those, of course, who say it's astonishing that you can still find 4 Americans in 10 who approve of what he is doing in office, given that we have seen the President of the United States take a reasonably well-performing economy and turn it into an economy that is now on the brink of a recession, that he's waged a trade war against basically the entire world, despite the fact that economists are all telling him that all he's going to do is create dislocation and substantial amounts of inflation here at home. And of course, we're seeing an authoritarian crackdown across the board, whether it's with regard to the issues of mass deportations or the issues of freedom of speech, the sidelining of Congress. I mean, he's barely sent a single piece of legislation to Congress. All of his governance over the last 100 days has been done by executive order, these kind of diktats that he signs every single day at the White House. We've also, of course, seen a confrontation with the judiciary, with the Trump administration quite simply ignoring a whole host of court orders. And yet there's also been a sort of sense that the wheels might be falling off the train, that the clown show might be crumbling from within. The concession by Elon Musk that after he said he was going to cut $2 trillion of public expenditure this year, he's fallen $1.8 trillion short and has decided to go back to the day job at Tesla because the electric car maker that he owns has seen a 71% dip in profits. Basically, its profit margins completely eviscerated as a result of public hostility towards him. So there are signs that things are obviously not going particularly smoothly, and yet they absolutely soldier on and continue to lead what I see The Economist this week is referring to as a revolutionary government, which I'm bound to say is something that I was saying several weeks ago. It is a revolutionary coup that they are trying to bring about here in Washington, D.C., and we are only 100 days into it.
Oh, well, by revolutionary, they mean there has been a revolution, not it's remarkable in its ability to change the status quo.
Yes, well, they actually make the argument in their editorial this week that this is the most consequential American president of the modern era, the most consequential first 100 days of the modern era, which, of course, the White House will seize upon as indicative of praise. But, of course, it's not praise at all, because they go on to express grave fear about where this country is heading, as they should.
Have prices and the effect of his trade war with China actually hit the shelves yet?
It's beginning, but it's going to get a lot worse in the next 30 days because the supply chains are such that there is a gap between tariffs being imposed and enforced and prices going up. So all the economic indicators are that within the next month, we're going to be seeing prices rising, shortages of some goods, because remember, some exporters have simply said, I'm not going to waste my time sending stuff to the United States until he completely backs down. Remember that the U-turn that he engaged in was only a partial U-turn, made no difference, of course, to the UK. We're still facing 10% tariffs, the baseline tariff that is now applying to all countries apart from China. But China particularly has started to hold shipments up. In some cases, we've seen countries rushing shipments here, and companies. I was reading that Apple had made sure that it had raced shipments of iPhones into the United States from China and India before the tariffs kicked in. But, those iPhones will sell out and the next lot will have higher prices. So there's no doubt about the direction of this. And that, of course, is what the markets understand, which is why the Dow Jones Industrial Average is now on track to have its worst monthly performance since 1932. Those who have studied 1932 will know that in a variety of ways, it wasn't a great year.
And I know it seems a long way away, but for people who run stores, it isn't, because they're going to have to put in their orders for their Christmas products now from China. I mean, that's where people's toys come from, and all the gifts under your Christmas tree most likely will be made, if not totally, then at least in part, from in China or with Chinese parts. And they're not going to be able to do that because they won't know how much the cost will be to the consumer on the shelf, because nobody knows. I bet Donald Trump doesn't even know what his next move on tariffs is. So he is going to be the Grinch that ruined Christmas.
Yeah, and of course, remember that even though it's only April, by Christmas we still won't have seen a whole host of new factories built in the United States and American workers retrained to make teddy bears or Jack-in-the-Boxes or whatever else anybody wants to give the kids at Christmas. I think you put your finger on a key issue. You said, when you said there that Donald Trump doesn't know what his own next move is. I think there's some truth in that, because everything that we've seen with regard to the tariffs, but also with regard to Ukraine, is that Donald Trump is essentially only ever as good as the last person that he's spoken to.
Right. You wrote an excellent article in the iPaper outlining this very thing.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's in, I think, Monday's paper. In so much as Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is the adult in the room. He's the man who keeps telling Donald Trump, you've got to engage in negotiations. And after Bessent has spoken to him, Donald Trump comes out and starts talking about the need to engage in negotiations and says that countries all over the world are kissing his ass in order to try and strike deals that alleviate the tariffs. But if he's just spoken to Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, or Howard Lutnick, his commerce secretary, who are sort of the apostles of protectionism, then he comes out and he starts waxing lyrical about, won't it be great for the United States to return to the situation that existed in the 1890s and make so much money out of tariffs that they can fund the entire government from tariffs and scrap income tax.
Yes.
If you look at what happened at the Vatican, that conversation with Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday in St. Peter's Basilica, Zelensky had Donald Trump's ear. And after it, what does Trump do? He immediately goes on social media as soon as the funeral is over and launches an attack on Vladimir Putin and says that if the Russians don't get serious about peace, he's going to impose further sanctions against the Russians. Now, had he just seen Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, who's been completely beguiled by Putin, instead of Volodymyr Zelensky, he would presumably have told us all once again that it was Zelensky who started the war and it was all Ukraine's fault and they deserved everything that they get.
He is like a dictation machine. You whisper in his ear and it comes right out his mouth.
Yeah, and I think there's a real challenge in that for our own government, not just for the Prime Minister, but also for Lord Mandelson here as Britain's ambassador to the USA and for the entire diplomatic corps. I mean, because it's not only a question of getting in front of him and getting into his ear and making your case, but you've got to try and stop the people who make alternative cases from immediately erasing what you've just said. And I think that's going to be hugely problematic for throughout this presidency.
Yes. And China, meanwhile, they stand still and do nothing, and by that method, they appear to be winning.
Well, they also accuse him of lying. I mean, because Trump insists that he's had multiple telephone conversations with President Xi, and it seems pretty apparent that that is not true. I mean, the Chinese have been told for the last 2 months that if they want a negotiation, they've got to start it, and President Xi has to request a conversation with President Trump. And President Xi has said, I'm not going to do that. We'll just wait, because the Chinese always play the long game, right?
Yeah.
So Trump keeps intimating that he's had all of these conversations with President Xi, but every time he gets asked, well, when was the last one and what was the tone? He says, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you right now. I'm not going to get into that now. And there's no evidence to support this claim coming from anywhere within the White House. I mean, Marco Rubio was asked about it, the Secretary of State, on television today. Could he confirm that these conversations had taken place? Well, he doesn't want to speak for the president. You know, I'll refer you to the White House for the answer to that question, because they know that these calls haven't happened.
My favourite stat of the week was Donald Trump said that we have made 200 trade deals with people who have come to, they're desperate to kiss my ass. There aren't 200 countries in the world.
Exactly. Even if you include the Falkland Islands and what was that strange archipelago
with just
of islands off the coast of Canada that's completely uninhabited, only inhabited by penguins, that is now facing whatever it was, a 45% tariff on its guano exports. I mean, it's
strange days indeed.
Yeah, I mean, at times a clown show, and at other times
a horror
deeply
show.
Authoritarian and deeply disturbing.
Good to talk to you, Simon. As always, thanks for that. Simon Marks, US correspondent for LBC.